Pueblo, Diego, Jose, Francisco de Paula, Juan Nepomuceno, Maria de los Remedios, Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad, Ruiz y Picasso.
25th of October 1881 to the 8th of April 1973 was a Spanish painter, sculptor, printmaker, ceramicist and theatre designer who spent most of his adult life in France. One of the most influential artists of the 20th century, he is known for co-founding the Cubist movement, the invention of constructed sculpture, the co-invention of collage, and for the wide variety of styles that he helped develop and explore. Among his most famous works are the proto-cubist Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, 1907, and the anti-war painting Guernica, 1937. A dramatic portrayal of the bombing of Guernica by German and Italian air forces during the Spanish Civil War. Picasso demonstrated extraordinary artistic talent in his early years, painting in a naturalistic manner through his childhood and adolescence. During the first decade of the 20th century, his style changed as he experimented with different theories, techniques and ideas. After 1906, the Fauvist work of the older artist Henri Matisse motivated Picasso to explore more radical styles, beginning a fruitful rivalry between the two artists, who subsequently were often paired by critics as the leaders of modern art. Picasso's output, especially in his early career, is often periodized. While the names of many of his later periods are debated, the most commonly accepted periods in his work are the Blue Period, 1901 to 1904, the Rose Period, 1904 to 1906, the African-influenced period, 1907 to 1909, Analytic Cubism, 1909 to 1912, and Synthetic Cubism, 1912 to 1919, also referred to as the Crystal Period. Much of Picasso's work of the late 1910s and early 1920s is in a neoclassical style, and his work in the mid-1920s often has characteristics of surrealism. His later work often combines elements of his earlier styles. Exceptionally prolific throughout the course of his long life, Picasso achieved universal renown and immense fortune for his revolutionary artistic accomplishments and became one of the best-known figures in 20th century art. Picasso was born at 11:15 p.m. on the 25th of October 1881 in the city of Malaga, Andalusia, in southern Spain. He was the first child of Don José Ruiz y Blasco, 1838 to 1913, and Maria Picasso y López. Picasso's family was of middle-class background. His father was a painter who specialized in naturalistic depictions of birds and other game. For most of his life, Ruiz was a professor of art at the School of Crafts and a curator of a local museum. Ruiz's ancestors were minor aristocrats. Picasso showed a passion and a skill for drawing from an early age. According to his mother, his first words were piz piz, a shortening of lápiz, the Spanish word for pencil. From the age of 7, Picasso received formal artistic training from his father in figure drawing and oil painting. Ruiz was a traditional academic artist and instructor who believed that proper training required disciplined copying of the masters and drawing the human body from plaster casts and live models. His son became preoccupied with art to the detriment of his classwork. In 1895, Picasso was traumatized when his 7-year-old sister Conchita died of diphtheria. After her death, the family moved to Barcelona, where Ruiz took a position at its School of Fine Arts. Picasso thrived in the city, regarding it in times of sadness or nostalgia as his true home. Ruiz persuaded the officials at the academy to allow his son to take an entrance exam for the advanced class. This process often took students a month, but Picasso completed it in a week, and the jury admitted him at just 13. As a student, Picasso lacked discipline but made friendships that would affect him in later life. His father rented a small room for him close to home so he could work alone, yet he checked up on him numerous times a day, judging his drawings. The two argued frequently. Picasso's father and uncle decided to send the young artist to Madrid's Real Academia de Bellas Artes de San Fernando, the country's foremost art school. At age 16, Picasso set off for the first time on his own, but he disliked formal instruction and stopped attending classes soon after enrollment. Madrid held many other attractions. The Prado housed paintings by Diego Velázquez, Francisco Goya and Francisco Zurbarán. Picasso especially admired the works of El Greco. Elements such as his elongated limbs, arresting colours and mystical visages are echoed in Picasso's later work. Picasso's training under his father began before 1890. His progress can be traced in the collection of early works now held by the Musée Picasso in Barcelona, which provides one of the most comprehensive records extant of any major artist's beginnings. During 1893, the juvenile quality of his earliest work falls away, and by 1894 his career as a painter can be said to have begun. The academic realism apparent in the works of the mid-1890s is well displayed in The First Communion, 1896, a large composition that depicts his sister Lola. In the same year, at the age of 14, he painted Portrait of Aunt Pepa, a vigorous and dramatic portrait that Juan Eduardo Solot has called, without a doubt, one of the greatest in the whole history of Spanish painting. In 1897, his realism began to show a symbolist influence, for example, in a series of landscape paintings rendered in non-naturalistic violet and green tones. What some call his modernist period, 1899 to 1900, followed. His exposure to the work of Rossetti, Steinlen, Toulouse-Lautrec and Edvard Munch, combined with his admiration for favourite old masters such as El Greco, led Picasso to a personal version of modernism in his works of this period. Picasso made his first trip to Paris, then the art capital of Europe, in 1900. There he met his first Parisian friend, journalist and poet Max Jacob, who helped Picasso learn the language and its literature. Soon they shared an apartment. Max slept at night while Picasso slept during the day and worked at night. These were times of severe poverty, cold and desperation. Much of his work was burned to keep the small room warm. During the first 5 months of 1901, Picasso lived in Madrid, where he and his anarchist friend Francisco de Assis Soler founded the magazine Art Joven, Young Art, which published 5 issues. Soler solicited articles and Picasso illustrated the journal, mostly contributing grim cartoons depicting and sympathizing with the state of the poor. The first issue was published on 31st of March 1901, by which time the artist had started to sign his work Picasso. That Picasso collaborated with Diaghilev's troupe. He and Igor Stravinsky collaborated on Pulcinella in 1920. Picasso took the opportunity to make several drawings of the composer. In 1925, the surrealist writer and poet André Breton declared Picasso as one of ours in his article Le Surrealisme et la Peinture, published in Révolution Surréaliste. Les Demoiselles was reproduced for the first time in Europe in the same issue. Yet Picasso exhibited Cubist works at the first Surrealistic Group exhibition in 1925. The concept of psychic automatism in its pure state, defined in the Manifesto Surrealism, never appealed to him entirely. He did at the time develop new imagery and formal syntax for expressing himself emotionally, releasing the violence, the psychic fears and the eroticism that had been largely contained or sublimated since 1909, writes art historian Melissa McQuillan. Although this transition in Picasso's work was informed by Cubism for its spatial relations, the fusion of ritual and abandon in the imagery recalls the primitivism of the Demoiselles and the elusive psychological resonances of his symbolist work, writes McQuillan. Surrealism revived Picasso's attraction to primitivism and eroticism. During the 1930s, the Minotaur replaced the Harlequin as a common motif in his work. His use of the Minotaur came partly from his contact with the Surrealists, who often used it as their symbol, and it appears in Picasso's Guernica. The Minotaur and Picasso's mistress, Marie Theresa Walter, are heavily featured in his celebrated Vollard suite of etchings. Retreating to his studio, he continued to paint, producing works such as Still Life with Guitar, 1942, and the Charnel House, 1944-48. Although the Germans outlawed bronze casting in Paris, Picasso continued regardless, using bronze smuggled to him by the French resistance. Around this time, Picasso wrote poetry as an alternative outlet. Between 1935 and 1959, he wrote over 300 poems, largely untitled except for a date and sometimes the location of where it was written. For example, Paris, 16th of May, 1936. These works were gustatory, erotic, and at times scatological, as were his 2 full-length plays, Desire Caught by the Tail, 1941, and The Four Little Girls, 1949. Picasso's final works were a mixture of styles, his means of expression in constant flux until the end of his life. Devoting his full energies to his work, Picasso became more daring, his works more colourful and expressive, and from 1968 to 1971, he produced a torrent of paintings and hundreds of copper plate etchings. At the time, these works were dismissed by most as pornographic fantasies of an impotent old man, or the slapdash works of an artist who has passed his prime. Only later, after Picasso's death, when the rest of the art world had moved on from abstract expressionism, did the critical community come to see the late works of Picasso as prefiguring neo-expressionism. Pablo Picasso died on the 8th of April 1973 in Mougins, France, from a pulmonary edema and a heart attack, the morning after he and his wife Jacqueline entertained friends for dinner. Picasso remained aloof from the Catalan independence movement during his youth, despite expressing general support and being friendly with activists within it. He did not join the armed forces for any side or country during World War I, the Spanish Civil War, or World War II. As a Spanish citizen living in France, Picasso was under no compulsion to fight against the invading Germans in either World War. In 1940, he applied for French citizenship, but was refused on the grounds of his extremist ideas evolving towards communism. At the start of the Spanish Civil War in 1936, Picasso was 54 years of age. Soon after hostilities began, the Republicans appointed him Director of the Prado, albeit in absentia, and he took his duties very seriously. According to John Richardson, supplying the funds to evacuate the museum's collection to Geneva. The war provided the impetus for Picasso's first overtly political work. He expressed anger and condemnation of Francisco Franco and fascists in The Dream and Lie of Franco, 1937, which was produced specifically for propagandistic and fundraising purposes. This surreal fusion of words and images was intended to be sold as a series of postcards to raise funds for the Spanish Republican cause. On the 9th of January 1949, Picasso created Dove, a black and white lithograph. It was used to illustrate a poster at the 1949 World Peace Council and became an iconographic image of the period, known as the Dove of Peace. Picasso's image was used around the world as a symbol of the peace congresses and communism. In 1962, he received the Lenin Peace Prize. Biographer and art critic John Berger felt his talents as an artist were wasted by the communists. According to Jean Cocteau's diaries, Picasso once said to him in reference to the communists, "I have joined a family, and like all families, it's full of shit." Arguably, Picasso's most famous work is his depiction of the German bombing of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War. This large canvas embodies for many the inhumanity, brutality, and hopelessness of war. Asked to explain its symbolism, Picasso said, "It isn't up to the painter to define the symbols, otherwise it would be better if he wrote them out in so many words. The public who look at the picture must interpret the symbols as they understand them." Guernica was exhibited in July 1937 at the Spanish Pavilion at the Paris International Exposition, and then became the centerpiece of an exhibition of 118 works by Picasso, Matisse, Braque, and Henry Lorenz that toured Scandinavia and England. After the victory of Francisco Franco in Spain, the painting was sent to the United States to raise funds and support for Spanish refugees. Until 1981, it was entrusted to the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York City, as it was Picasso's expressed desire that the painting should not be delivered to Spain until liberty and democracy had been established in the country. During World War II, Picasso remained in Paris while the Germans occupied the city. Picasso's artistic style did not fit the Nazi ideal of art, so he did not exhibit during this time. He was often harassed by the Gestapo. During one search of his apartment, an officer saw a photograph of the painting Guernica. "Did you do that?" the German asked Picasso. "No," he replied.
You did.